Do you know that some judges are forced to legally hand out long sentences even if they don't think that's right? Well, that's what mandatory minimums are. And in this video, I'm going to be going over and explaining what mandatory minimums are and how they came about and how they affect the African American community. So the whole war on drugs initially started with President Richard Nixon about 1971. And he started funding agencies like the DEA and other agencies similar to that. But the real action, the real push came when Ronald Reagan went into office in about 1980. And he had like a zero tolerance for the whole war on drugs. And just to go back a little bit, Richard Nixon back in 1971 declared drugs public enemy number one. So he's the spearhead of all this. But when Reagan after Reagan got into office, he's the one who really started to put the hammer to the nail. You know what I mean? So he had a zero tolerance, and then he ultimately created the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. And this is where it forced judges to be stripped of their discretion. So before, judges had discretion when it came to certain cases. Like they seen you got caught with a certain amount of crack, a certain amount of weed, they could use their discretion to enforce a certain amount of time or the sentence you would serve for that. But when he enforced this act, that stripped him of all of that. So it created mandatory minimums. And it didn't matter if you were a first-time offender, a non-violent offender, you have to face the mandatory minimum. And this is just me throwing out numbers. But let's say if you had 5 grams of crack, right? And crack was very prevalent back in the day. Like, you hear people saying crack in the 80s, that was like booming back then. So let's say the mandatory minimum after the Anti-Drug Abuse Act was 2 years. And this may not be accurate. I don't think it is. But let's say the mandatory minimum for 5 grams of crack is 2 years. And you've never committed a crime in your life, but you just get caught selling crack. If the mandatory minimum is 2 years, that is the least. That's the lowest you can go. That's like you can't go in and serve anything less than that. So, and let's say the maximum is 50 years. That's the most you can serve. But you got to think from a perspective like this. If you never committed a crime in your life and you just are caught selling drugs, you caught having drugs on you, you're going to do 2 years off the muscle. And this is part of the reason why it affected so many black communities. And in my next point, I'm going to get into how it really hurt us as African Americans, and it really set us back a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to talk about how it really affected the black community. So back in the day, like I said in the last point, crack was booming. Like that was the how how a lot of people smoke marijuana now. Like crack was like boom back then. You hear people say crack in the 80s, like yeah, like it was that back then. So basically back then, that was the drug of choice. Everybody was on crack, basically. So this war on drugs and the whole Anti-Drug Abuse Act, it didn't necessarily force people, but law enforcement and other agencies targeted black communities because they knew that it was so prevalent in the black community. So in this happening, it forced more black people to be arrested. And the people that were getting arrested, of course, weren't the main people that were selling drugs. They may be lookouts or they may be like runners or carriers. They're not the head honcho. They're not the plug or any of that. They just the low-level guys. And these low-level guys are getting caught and have to serve long mandatory minimum sentences that are ridiculous. And in my note, it literally says that the sentencing disparities, let's say an example is, and I think this may be true, I'm going based off my notes, so don't quote me on it, but 5 grams of crack carries a mandatory minimum of 5 years, but 500 grams of cocaine carries the same sentence. 5 grams of crack to 500 grams of powder cocaine, and it carries the same amount of sentence. So let's say a black person has 5 grams of crack. He's going to do 5 years. Let's say another black person, or let's say a white person, he has 5 grams of powder cocaine. He's not going to have to serve a mandatory minimum of 5 years. If y'all don't understand what I'm saying, that's crazy. And if you're not reading between the lines, I'm going to break it down for you, be as blunt and as truthful as possible. It was not necessarily based on science. It is political. They knew that black people were selling cocaine like that. And they knew that powder, and they knew not cocaine. They knew black people were selling crack. And they knew that cocaine, the powder, was more prevalent in the white communities. So this literally gave them like a legal way to put more black people in jail. And it forced people of lower income communities to go to jail. And that's really black people. Let's just not say lower income communities. It forced more black people to go to jail. And of course, it makes it look somewhat better because They have 500 grams of cocaine, then they get the same sentence. But bro, crack was so much more easily accessible. You could sell crack easier. Crack comes from powder cocaine, if you don't know that. But that's how it affected black communities. And the result of this, it split families up. It tore households apart. My bad, y'all. My doggone phone done cut out. I'm running out of storage on my phone. But what I really want to tell y'all is, like, at the height of the war on drugs, 1 in 3 black men were projected to be incarcerated at some point in his life. And that's like just crazy to think about. Like, all because a president put into effect to be harsher on drugs, and it ultimately affected black communities. Like, it's not by coincidence. And I'm not trying to get political or just get racial or anything, but like, bro, like, black people have been undermined for so many years. This is why people feel the way they feel. Like, bro, it is no way on God's green earth 5 grams of cocaine, 5 grams of crack should equate to 5 years, when 500 grams of powder of cocaine equate to 5 years. Like, that don't even sound right. But that's the world that we lived in and continue to live in. And another thing that I want to leave y'all with, it says, today, black Americans are still incarcerated at nearly 5 times the rate of white Americans. And it's really a legacy that goes all the way back to the 1980s and even further back than that. But it's like a repeating cycle, and it's tough. But I feel like as a country, we take like 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Like, it's always, you go this way, then we come back this way. It's always a sway, because some people are stuck in the old ways, stuck how it used to be back in the day. But some people have a new mind and don't see color. You know what I mean? But I don't want to get too political on y'all. My whole point of this video is to educate y'all on the war of drugs and how it affected minority communities, and specifically affected the black community and tore households apart. But if y'all like this video, man, like, comment, subscribe, and give y'all daily videos. I really appreciate y'all watching, and I'm gone. Yeah.